past, I have shown you how I make my patterns, and so today will be no different. This particular pair of pants that I'm wearing, I recently made. I'm actually going to make a second pair because I really like them. The inside is fuzzy. It's a wide leg so that I can wear a boot, or I can even wear fleece leggings underneath. I will, for the pattern that I share with you, do a zipper on the side, just through normal wear. I just found that I'm not too happy with the zipper being in the front, but I did need something high-waisted so that when my sweater is down, I don't have a draft. It's very, very well insulated in here, and I'll be doing that with this fabric here. So you can see it's kind of like a velvet on one side, and then this material on the other side. And so far through wear, it doesn't create little pills, so that's also nice. And I have extra that I might actually make gloves out of. But today what I'm going to be showing you is actually for a fall or a winter skirt. And have a very heavy material here that I'll be using. So this actually is a really nice gray, and it has a bit of a pattern or texture to it. And then I also have another really heavy material here, very similar to the pants that I'm wearing, but the underside of this is rather scratchy, so I'm actually going to use this as the inside of this, so that it can be reversible, because this black other side, you may not be able to tell, but it really doesn't look very nice. It looks like the wrong side of fabric. But this will also be a double-sided skirt, so I can flip it inside out and essentially wear another color as an all-in-one item. As far as the pattern goes, I will show you what I have drawn up here. Okay, so when you are making your pattern, first consider the body that it is going to go on. Now, obviously this one is a bit of an exaggeration, but that's so that I can kind of show you the differences. Usually when you purchase clothing, they'll ask for your waist and your hip size. If they're pants, it should be an inseam, and so on. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to look at what I'm calling the widest point. Now, this is usually the hip, but not always, because everyone is designed differently. I want to call this widest point instead, so that we can be sure to consider all of your assets and not focus necessarily on the pelvis, but also your glutes. And this will vary on, every body type. So that's really what you need to focus on. And you see the dashed lines here is kind of to show that we're going to focus on the widest point and really make that, in terms of our fabric, our max line, and try not to go under that. Of course, we will narrow a waist very simply later on, but for right now, when we're making a pattern, let's not guess on what that measurement would be. It can be pretty risky. So you can see here, widest point, so measure the full circumference, and you want to round up. So 39 inches, just make it 40 inches. And then I cut that number in half because there are two pieces to the fabric, per se. So that's what leads us over to your pattern. Now, because A is on the fold, you can see at the top I have 10 inches. That 10 inches is really 20 inches because it's folded. Okay, now this is the way fabric comes. It comes folded. On rare occasion, if it's very, very thick, it may be on a single, but generally what we're looking at, you can see here, you're looking at a bolt size of 60 inches, and I have by 54. The 54 is the length, so 1 yard is 36 inches. Okay, so a yard and a half will make this skirt, or at least for someone my height. So these are all numbers that you want to figure out on your own. So see here I have a max height and a max width, the 20 inch, and I have 40. I actually go so high as 45, somewhere down here. Sorry, those are the pants. But anyway, always be generous because it's very hard to add fabric back in to make up for miscalculation. You can always chop it off later. So you can see here how the B portion, not being on a fold, ends up being 2 pieces, and that becomes the back there where the seam is. Now when I demonstrated for you, I actually broke that back piece up into several pieces. You don't have to do that. Now I see here a modification I added here for A. If later you wanted to make this A-frame into a mermaid, you know, an hourglass shape, that is also very simple. You're going to do the same pattern. You're going to try it on while it's inside out, and then you're just going to pin it exactly where you'd like it. Walk around, make sure there's enough leg room for you to comfortably walk, and then stitch that line. So it's a lot simpler than you think. Also take into account the 3-dimensional form here. You see how I can even have it fan outward from the back? So if you want to do that, take that into account into your measurement. Otherwise, the way I have this laid out, it's even on both sides, front and back. Okay, let's get started. Now, before we get started on laying out the fabric and plotting and then cutting, one thing I want to do beforehand, now if you don't have one of these, you don't necessarily have to go out and buy one. A ruler works just fine, but it's just kind of nice because it slides and adjusts so that you can figure out, you know, how much space to leave on the edge of your pattern for overlap to then tuck under and make a really nice seam. So the way that it works is I'm going to turn on my machine and see where my needle position is. And then I just kind of lay this in front of it. And then with the guide, you know, this will kind of help you on where everything sits and how large you want as far as a excess. So I like to do it to this line. This is really just a preference. So if I pull my needle down so I know where it hits right there, and then I'm just going to hold this side and then I'm just going to slide it up until it reaches that mark. And so now I know that when I am drawing my chalk line on my fabric, I know that, you know, if this is where the end is, I'm cutting here to leave this much excess all the way around the pattern. And this will come in handy later. You know, you can, and I've been guilty of it, really cutting choppy lines and not measuring things out. And you can certainly do that. It just makes things a little more difficult when you're putting the pattern together, when things don't line up exactly. And so it is really nice to stay on top of that from the very beginning. And that way, even if you lose your chalk line or it wipes off and you're like, oh no, I don't know where my line is, you'll know that it is inset, you know, this distance. And that's an easy way to find where you are on the fabric. This is also nice because this much overhang, you can see half of that size would be a nice, you know, if you tucked under the edge to leave a really nice finished seam. It's just a really good size. It's not too much, not too little. So now we're going to go and take our tool here and we're going to start plotting out on our fabric. Now, if you don't have a triangle, drafting or drawing triangle, this is what I'm doing. So I did it in reverse, but there's the 40-inch mark up there, right about here, giving generous room because I can, just eyeballing it, I can see it's crooked. So following this line here, what I did was I used my ruler, which I know that this is a 90-degree angle here, here, and here. And I know that this line is true, so I just sit it flush here, and then I drew a straight line across with my chalk. Now I can use this line to run back this way to ensure a straight 40-40. And wherever those points meet, I draw another straight line, and then I can cut. I really should cut off the excess because you can see right now it's a little isosceles right there. It's off by a good amount, pretty crooked. So I first want to clean up that edge because this can be very confusing later on, especially with as many pieces as I have. Just make sure everything is plumb, everything is straight, everything is perfect. It's just going to be so much easier later when you don't have to play the guessing game on where to sew. See how I'm doing this? This was my line from before. I'm just going to lay it down right about there. Mark, mark, mark. You really only need 2 points, but because it's just such a long piece and my ruler doesn't span the entire distance, I put 4 down just to be safe. But then I'm going to mark that out and then I'll cut it. Right, my 2 pieces are cut out. I went ahead and labeled them. So there's A and this is B. I went ahead and put the B right side up for the pattern, so I know which is which. And now I'm going to take these same 2. I'm going to set them aside gently. I do have them pinned so that they shouldn't slip apart. So go ahead and pin them, but very, very gently move them aside, because now I'm going to lay out this other fabric and then put these exactly on top right where they should be and then cut them out. And after that, we are ready to start putting this thing together. Now, before I put this on the sewing machine, what I did, just to show you, I went ahead and put my pieces together. You can see A and B, and then here's the other side of B, the way that they would go. Now, I know I said I wanted a side zipper, but just for the sake of trying this on, I left the entire back open so that I could kind of get a gauge on how this is going to work. And I certainly could leave the side open and just do the back, but I wanted to see how this bell shape looks. So I'm going to try it on, make sure that it fits. And notice that I put these pins right on the line where I would be sewing. So I'm mimicking stitches here to really give me a good idea of what this is actually going to look like. Looks like there's a defect in the fabric there. So, so now I can actually try it on. So I have, because I'm working with 2 different fabrics and 1 thread. Now you could have 2 different threads, you know, depending on which side you're considering up will be the bobbin or the spool color for up top. And then your bobbin color, which is down below. I actually have to change this out. It's still purple from the pants that I recently made. This could be the color of your other fabric if they're both very different, like blue and red, you know, so that way the bobbin stitch would match, you know, the fabric you consider bottom and vice versa. In this case, they actually both go really well with this color here. So I'm just going to make my spool color and my bobbin color be the same thread. You do want to make sure that the thread you're using matches the weight of the fabric, that you're using something this thick, you're using something made for coats and jackets, and that you're not using something that is a light cotton for embroidery or something like that. So things to keep in mind when you're shopping for fabric. I usually also buy the matching spool for it. I used to have a huge collection, but I don't anymore, so I'm kind of starting over. So for you, if this is your first time, it's just a good practice to make sure that you already secured all of your matching pieces. I also got 2 different zippers. At the time, I couldn't decide which was better, so I'll just return, you know, keeping my receipt, I'll return the one that I decided not to use. And I'm ready to go. So right now I'm just kind of showing you, for anyone who has never done this before, how it works. I know it's simple to talk about, but seeing is believing. So with this fabric, remember how I told you how slippery it is when it's on itself? I think as good practice, you should just treat all fabric as if it is this slippery and pin it while you're sewing. Because if you don't, sometimes it will just, over time, it will slip. And then when you get to the end, you'll have like an inch of leftover fabric on one side, knowing that you were off on the whole thing. And that'll just make a mess. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to kind of briefly show you how I do it. Now this was the extra piece that I decided to add on. If you recognize it, it was the scrap that I cut from in between the 2 pieces A and B. So I already did one side, and you can see what I'm doing is it's going to make these little sections, I guess, these folds. And so even though I don't have enough to make ruffles per se, it's going to add a really nice detail to the back of the skirt. So because I didn't plan for that, I also wouldn't have had enough fabric for it, but because of that, I have the smallest margin possible. So you can see right here, that's about as small as I can get. If you can see right in here, I am just butting it right to the edge of the sewing foot, and the needle I have to the far right, as far as it'll go, to really try to get as close to this edge as I can, because I'm trying to get the most out of this little scrap of fabric. And so anytime you start a line, you go forward 1, 2, and then you hit this, this little back, you push it down, hit the pedal again, it'll go back, and then let it go, and then it'll come forward. So you go back and forth to start a line. But I already started, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick that on there. And just with one finger in between like this, I'm going to hold them and make sure, because this way I have control over both sides where I can pull forward or push back by having my fingers like this, if you can see. Just kind of this finger inside like that. And I'm not pulling, you know, I'm not pulling it, because you see how it has a little bit of stretch. All fabric does, the weave allows for a little bit of give. I'm not pulling, I'm guiding, and I'm being firm in my guidance. So I'm just gonna start going again. And as I get close, I come back, readjust, and make sure that this part is straight, because as this starts to bunch and it'll pull, it'll throw you off track. So just put as much of the fabric up here to keep it straight and firm, and then we go again. Now you can go really fast, but there's really no point, because going faster just gives you less reaction time. And also make sure that none of it is bunching underneath. Rookie mistake, I've done that where I started sewing other parts underneath it, so make sure it's always clear, and it is. And then here we are at the end. Now this piece was the scrap, and so it wasn't measured right to fit. But the good news is it actually has more than I need. This is the rest of the skirt, and this is the scrap, so it's okay that there's an overlap. Since I didn't measure them to match, I'm just going to go right to about, where is that end? Right about there. And then I'll show you, I'm going to go forward, hit the back. There we go. Bring it to the upright position as far as it go. Up, and then out it comes. Now this newer design comes with a cutter on the side. I'm just going to cut it on the side there. Put this back into the foot, and it's ready to go for the next run. And if you don't have one with the side cutter, these are awesome. These shears are so sharp. Be careful with them. But since this has a cutter on the side, you probably can't see what I'm talking about here. It's on the side here, so I'm just going to cut that off. And always have a little trash box for all your threads. Okay, so the two pieces were done. On the back here you can kind of see the detail. It was just those two bars, and then I put it on, pinned it, and then cut the excess off, which you can see. That's how you know what the shape is. Don't guess, just put it on, pin it, and then you'll know. So this is the back of one side. You can see because it's double-sided. I went ahead and put them together. I put it on and then tucked the top hem down while it was on me. Now the reason I'm not putting a band or doing this a different way is because it's reversible. I want, you know, this color to show or this color to show. And so this was the best way to accomplish that. I'm leaving this edge raw how it is, and I'm only going to sew up to about this point because this is where the zipper is going to go. And you can see there's a slight adjustment that I'll have to make in the end after it's all said and done. So just leave any excess or extra things to be for the side for the zipper. Here, that'll be the last thing we do. So now I'm just going to start at one end and stitch all the way around to do the waistline. Alright, so zippers are really tricky, and they even give me a hard time, and I've done this so many times over and over again, and I still will admit they're pretty difficult, although, you know, we deal with it because there really is no better way to fasten something together. So for what is a pain in the rear end, short term ends up being so nice every single day you use the garment. So it's worth it. So the best way that I can show you how to put a zipper on is to, first of all, I would do this top part. Now remember I left a little bit on either side, and that's because I tucked it inside. So you can see here how I went with my finger and tucked it in. So I've finished off these edges and I've pinned it as if it were stitched, right? And so you can see here how the garment opens up. Now the zipper in this case, because I'm doing this double-sided, will actually be stitched inside here. And it's gonna be tough, I'm not gonna lie. This is, every time I do it, if I wanna do a nice clean job, I end up hand stitching the end closure here. And I do recommend adding a little hook at the top like this. All well-made garments have a hook at the top before the zipper begins. Cheaply made ones don't, and there's a really good reason that you want the hook to bear the greatest amount of weight. It's easily replaced versus potentially ripping your zipper, because once that's done, the zipper is ruined and now you have to take the whole thing out and put in a new one. So it's worth the cheap hook to make that your very top fastener. It also makes it really easy when you're getting dressed. You can just engage the hook and then zip the rest. So I'm actually going to try this on now that I've fitted this. You know, try it on a million times. It's just like cooking. You want to taste, taste, taste as you go. And so when you're sewing, keep trying it on, making sure that you're on the right track, because although you can use a seam ripper to undo any stitches you do, it is time consuming and it's a pain, so it's best if you get it right the first time. Okay, so the zipper is on. You can see it here. And I have a hook at the top to kind of help when getting dressed. So, and I went ahead and hand stitched this little closure here. So I left a little bit of a gap to tuck the end of the zipper in. The best way to do a zipper, I actually forgot to record it when I was doing it, is to get one that's far longer than you need and unzip the zipper all the way down past the point that you need to sew. And then you're going to stitch one side, and then you're going to zip it back up so you can see where the top of the other side needs to be. Pin it in place, zip it back down again, and then sew that down. And then at the end, cut off any excess, tuck it in, and then I just hand stitch the little closure there. So what I'm going to show you now is I'm doing the hem. I left the hem for the very end just in case I had to get up inside the skirt to fix that, but I was able to close it off from the outside. So I'm just showing you how I'm doing it. So right now I just have it laid flat to make sure I have the right length. And you can see I haven't done the edges yet. So I started with the front, and I just actually started with this top piece, tucking it in, pinning it. And then I did the bottom to match. So you're just tucking and pinning. And so now I'm doing the edges. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm just tucking them in and pinning. If it's easier to do the corners by flipping this over, you can do that. Trying to do this one-handed isn't working out, but you see how it is. You just kind of tuck it in and then straighten it out. Do the same for the other side. Tuck. There we go. and then I'll stick a pin in that. And then with all the pins in place, I will try this on once again, make sure that the length is where I want it, and then I will stitch it closed. Once I do that, this skirt is done. Fozzie looks exhausted, even though he didn't do any of the work. Yeah, and then this skirt is finished. That's it.